tell you what.
All right, everyone. Welcome to episode 107.
I was just about to ask.
Something
107. Like that.
Yeah, 107. Sure, we'll go with that. And 107. 107. Welcome to episode 107 of the Retic Lounge. We have another species spotlight for you guys. And this is one that I've been wanting to do for a very long time, but Nathan knows that every time we do these species spotlights, I happen to get a new species of snake in my possession, and anacondas, green anacondas specifically, are probably top 3 on my bucket list. And I just
that'll be a hard sell right before the new baby.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask Meghan to give her best sales pitch for me, but I feel like out of all of the lack of impulse control that I have with getting different species, the green anaconda is one I really want to wait for, because I can't even tell you why, but I want it and really bad, but for some reason I can't pull the trigger. So maybe Meghan with Megaconda, who is going to be our guest, in case you guys didn't hear what I just said, maybe she can change my mind on that. But Nathan, I'm excited for this one. Megan's always great to talk to. I used to like chatting up with her on the Fat Man Sunday little get together that we used to have once a month.
That's right. That's probably where I first met Meghan too. And then NARBC, of course.
Yeah.
But yeah, wow, I was about to say retics, but anacondas, they were my first snake bite. They got me over that fear of what's going to happen. What's it going to feel like? So that's going to be fun.
Are not over your fear of getting bit.
No,
we talk about this every episode. We hate getting bit.
No, but the anticipation of that first bite when you're really starting to get into snakes, I think
right,
is probably the worst.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. And it took me, into keeping retics, it took me 4.5 years to finally get bit. Yeah, I still don't like it, but, so yeah, we're going to be talking about green anacondas specifically. We'll have someone else to come and talk on about yellows. So, if you guys like large constrictors, or if you are fascinated by the largest bodied snake in the world, this episode is going to be for you guys. Real quick, I do want to give a shout out to our Patreon members before we get started. They have a bunch of questions that they have down for Meghan that we'll ask at the end of the episode. So make sure you stay tuned to the end so you can listen to see what's on there with those questions. Some of them are really great. And I want to remind everyone, we don't have a banner yet, but we are, and when I say we, the Reptile Lounge Network is now sponsored by Cold-Blooded Cafe. I'm going to go ahead and we can start dropping that code in our description starting this episode, but Reptile Lounge 20 for 20% off your next purchase with Cold-Blooded Cafe. We're going to be getting our advertisement for them here shortly, and that promotional banner. But we're excited to have them on board for those of you keeping retics and any other species as you're tuning in. There's not another company you could probably trust more than Chris and Des over at Cold-Blooded Cafe. So Nathan, you want to jump into anything else before we bring Meghan on?
No, I think we're all set.
All right, let's go ahead and do it. What's going on, Meghan? Whether you've poured your heart and soul into your reptile business or you've just begun your business journey, AE Foundry has you covered with next-level expertise in graphic design, motion graphics, videography, photography, and so much more. If you've been dying for a new logo for your reptile business, motion graphics for your current logo, a new website, or need assistance making your video podcast come to life, then listen carefully. AE Foundry's mission places storytelling at its core. AE Foundry believes that a distinctive story and background are the driving forces that set your brand apart. In today's market, consumers seek more than just products. They crave a connection built on trust with the brands they cherish. AE Foundry is committed to empowering small businesses and fostering authenticity that resonates with their consumers. Reach out to them and let them help you craft a visual narrative that helps establish a genuine and lasting connection with your audience. To contact AE Foundry, email them at aromero@aefoundry.com or on Instagram at AEFoundry. When it comes to housing your retics, trust me, you're going to want an enclosure that will be just as strong and durable as your reticulated python. The Heartland Reptile Enclosure is next level tough and will outlive you and your retic by several generations. Heartland Reptile Enclosures are designed and manufactured out of powder-coated aluminum to provide the highest quality and longevity available in the reptile enclosure. What makes them even better is they are lighter than your PVC and plastic enclosures out there and are extremely tough. Stop playing around with plastic enclosures for your large constrictors and step up your enclosure game with the Heartland Reptile Enclosure. To inquire about one of these enclosures, speak to Jordan himself at Heartland Reptiles on Instagram, Facebook, and on TikTok. Here on TRL, we preach about the importance of using hooks, feeding tongs, and other tools with your reticulated python all the time. Animal Equipment by Stoney not only has all the tools you need for any snake you keep, but they have the absolute best hooks on the market. What sets Animal Equipment by Stoney's hooks apart from the other guys is their polycarbonate hook ends that provide a warm feel that won't disturb or bother your retic, ensuring a positive interaction from the get-go. Since 2008, AE Stoney has been supplying zoos, herpetologists, and other animal professionals with their tools. It's time for you to step your hook game up and buy an AE Stoney hook. To learn more and purchase one of their amazing products, visit aestoney.com.
Hi, how are you guys?
Good. Yeah, we were chatting in the back a little bit before this, all about anacondas and your experience. I'm really excited to dive in today.
Yeah.
All right, Megan, if you don't mind, let's do our stereotypical, like, you getting into snakes, you getting into reptiles, and then, really just fast forwarding is where'd you start with the anacondas? How did you, I'm genuinely curious. How did you get into that road and decided to go with these awesome but massive animals?
It's kind of funny. So I've just had reptiles my entire life. I think I started with ball pythons when I was 5. Me and my brother both got them. And so since then we just kind of started getting bigger animals until we're teenagers. And we had burms and retics prior to me getting an anaconda. And the anaconda was the one thing our parents was don't get. They're mean, the typical stereotype of them. They smell, whatever. And so I was 15, which I don't recommend doing this at a young age. But we already had the big snake experience and yeah. I found one on Craigslist for $120. And
wow.
My brother's older than me, so I was here, take this money and go get this snake for me. And I still have that snake. Her name's Puppy. She's my biggest female. I've had her.
That's Puppy?
Yeah, I've had her
awesome.
16 years now.
Man.
How old was she when you got Puppy?
So I was told she was 3 years old, but she was the size of a yearling. She was tiny.
Okay.
And they were just feeding her mice once a month. So she was underweight.
Okay.
But yeah. So she's probably closer to probably 18 years old if I had to guess. I don't really know. I just know how long I've had her, which is going on 16 years.
Yeah, that makes sense. I feel in the mainland retic community, I see that all the time. They're yeah, small bloodline mainlands. It's 3 years old and only 7 feet. And I see people all the time, they'll buy them and then they start to feed it what they're actually supposed to. And it's it grew pretty quickly.
So, from there, I just kind of started getting more and it turned into what it is today. So
I'm excited to jump in on why you just grew to love them so much. But you said you were keeping burns and you kept retics, and this is a retic podcast. So before we dive head first, deep diving into anacondas, can we just talk a little bit about your retic experience? Because we were talking backstage and Nathan reminded me of a video that you had in your room with your camera that you flipped off your retic because it came out of its enclosure wanting food and striking. And I'm just curious if that's your overall good general census of what a retic is for you, or what's...
I mean, that's just your typical retic food response, you know?
Right.
Mhm.
I mean, I still keep retics and burms. Like, I still have everything I started with, basically. Like, I just kind of fell in love with anacondas and focused on that more than anything else. But for the retics, like, especially like that video, I just cleaned it. She was cool with me picking her up out of the tub, no hook, nothing. I think I posted like the full video eventually, but it didn't do as well. And I put her in the cage, and you see her go to the back of the cage, and then she turns around. You can just kind of read that behavior of them. And she struck twice, actually. So she struck at me, and you can see me like push her off my hand just really fast. And that's where I go to like close the door. She ends up biting herself when I did that. And then you see me like flick its tail, which everyone thinks like that's like the worst thing to do. Like that's how you get a snake to move.
Right.
Like,
if you're put into that position and need to get a snake into its enclosure.
Exactly. It's the tail.
Yeah.
I feel like it's the new behavioral wave, right? Of like this positive interaction, positive experience, and that's their sensitive part. And so a lot of people are very hypersensitive to the idea of like, oh, you're touchy in a place it doesn't want to be touched with, so you're ending it on a bad experience. And sure, if you're trying to do behavioral training with your retic, but at the end of the day, I have snakes all the time that they're going in super slow. I got 8 more that I need to clean in 8-foot enclosures, and you give it a quick tap on the tail and it goes right in.
Exactly. Like, people don't understand that. But like, yeah. And then you see it come out again, and that's where you see me like shut the door on it kind of, and I flip it off. I mean, that's just it being hungry, and it is what it is. It's a retic. It's what, like, the thing's fine. I still have it. She's actually, that video's like, I posted that like 2 years ago. That video was filmed like 2 years prior to that. She's like twice the size now. So
still have the same food response.
Oh
yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, same all the time. She's like the one that will like strike at the glass when you like walk in. She's just that retic. So
have you bred retics?
So like on my own, like no, like I used to do it with my brother back in the day, and I would help him out and do all that stuff. And then I met my husband, and he breeds retics, so it's just like I focus on one thing, he'll focus on the other kind of situation now.
Gotcha.
So like, yeah, I own them. I've always owned them like myself. It's just I've never really cared to like pair them myself, when I've always had like people in my life that'll do that, and then I focus on the anacondas.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I'm going to throw out a guess here, and I could be wrong, but based off of your love for anacondas, I'm going to assume that you prefer Burmese over retics.
Yeah, maybe. I don't have as many though. I only have about like 5 or 6 burms, where I have way more retics than anacondas.
Okay, fair.
So with burms, I like certain morphs, and that's what I've stuck to.
Caramel?
Caramel. I have some. They're supposed to be like quad heads, so they're 100% albino pied, and then they're pos het granite caramel.
Nice. Okay.
They'll be ready. Well, the male's ready now. The female will be ready next year.
Awesome. I will say, out of all the pied stuff that has come to the market, I tend to favor the burm pieds. They look pretty damn incredible.
Yeah, they're pretty cool.
Awesome. And as far as like retics, generally speaking, and how that goes, I guess, we'll get into that once we start talking about anaconda behavior. I'd kind of want to compare, contrast the two, but let's talk a little bit about like, I don't know. Let's talk about what is it about anacondas that you like, what makes them unique? What captivated you to continue to like move forward with them?
I think it was just like the first one I got. She was just super calm and cool from like the beginning, but I always loved their stereotype, and it was like completely different from what they actually are. Because everyone assumes anacondas like super mean or not, and they're actually like super docile. But you just have to work with them, which is just holding them. Like babies, yeah, they're nippy, but so is any other species. So it's kind of cool to like show people that they're not like what everyone thinks they really are. And that's just kind of what I fell in love with doing, I guess.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said about that. And I don't know, there's just something really cool about having a massive animal like an anaconda that's just like puppy, that like it's like they're a just a puppy dog. I think I've gone to shows where you've had some of your animals before, and it's mind blowing to see how slow, gentle moving they are.
Oh yeah, and then it's really cool. Is like you watch their tongue flicks. They leave it out and just kind of go back and forth. It's nothing like other thing you've kind of like seen. So it's kind of cool to like watch.
The long tongue flick you're talking about, like just like hanging out there for a while.
Oh yeah, they'll hang
That's
out
really cool.
forever.
Oh yeah.
So
that's pretty cool. Now Megaconda. What inspired the name?
My name's Meghan Anaconda.
All right, great. I was hoping you'd answer it just like that.
There's another story behind it, but that's basically just kind of how the name came about. So I don't know if you know who Tim O'Reilly is. He's like the music guy at Prehistoric. Okay. So I've known them for like 15 years. I've known them forever. Like they were basically like 30 minutes from me.
Sure.
But Tim would always call me that because I just kept collecting anacondas before like I had a name or blew up or anything. I was a teenager at the time. He would just call me that all the time. And it just kind of stuck. And it was just my name and anaconda put together. So that's kind of where the name came from.
That's a great person in the reptile world to give you your nickname. So
yeah.
I would take it with
absolutely.
Pride.
Oh yeah.
Honestly, and I don't think he gets the credit enough, man, but Tim O'Reilly is he's got to be up in the conversation with the Retic goats.
Oh yeah.
Like he's got to be like top 3 easy.
Yeah. If not like number 1.
Exactly.
Yeah. And
like
he's so quiet and like behind the scenes too. Like he doesn't want any attention, which is probably why he doesn't get the credit he deserves. But he just he's very much a behind the scenes kind of person.
Yeah. That's a good guess. That would, if we could get him on, someone needs to give me a bunch of high fives or something. But if we can get Tim O'Reilly on, that'd be awesome. Yeah, exactly. What's great is I've reached out to Prehistoric Pets, and Tim's the one who answered the phone, and I was like, dude, awesome to talk to you. You have no clue who I am, but I'm going to pretend like we're friends. How's it going?
He's like the main manager guy there now when Jay's and Juliet aren't there.
Yeah.
Because they're always traveling now.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah, true. Have you... I'm curious, before we get into like natural range, habitat, all that good stuff, I guess I really want to know behavior wise. So can you get us into the mindset of like what it looks like to keep them, how their behavior is different than other large constrictors that you've kept, why you prefer that maybe, and I guess I'm even curious to go into like behaviors in regards to keeping them and like understanding the way they tick and they work, because I've kept retics for a while now, and I now started getting chondros and I have carpets. And when you start to diversify the collection, as a kid, I had a pretty eclectic group of animals, but now as an adult where I'm paying attention to behavior more, it's pretty drastic. And so I can only imagine that it's no different than with a green anaconda. So I'm curious if you can kind of go into detail about their behaviors, the nuances, things to pick up on.
So, okay, so you know how you can like read a retic's behavior pretty easily?
Like, pupils, tongue flick. Yeah.
So
open
anacondas, not so much. You have to really like pay attention to them because they're pretty unpredictable. But the thing is they don't have that strong of a food response. They don't push like retics do. They're not like you have like the typical aggression you see out of, not aggression, but like behavior you see out of a retic. Completely opposite. You can't really read it with an anaconda.
Mm-hmm.
So, but like they're not, like I said, they're not as like aggressive towards like getting what they want. They kind of just sit there. But they are like 10 times stronger. So when you hold a retic compared to an anaconda, the power you feel in your hand is just completely different.
Yeah, I had buddies with him, and he was actually who helped me during back surgery with the retics. And before back surgery, I held his big green anaconda, and I was just like, I cannot imagine like just the maintenance on this thing, because it holds you. Like,
oh yeah,
it holds you.
Oh, yeah.
You are not holding it. The squeeze on that thing is insane.
My favorite videos of yours, Megan, on your social media accounts is you getting them out of the enclosure and how you have to spin to get them out and drag them. And I can see that you're walking and your knees are just like, you can tell that you're just carrying this presence.
I mean, yeah. So they don't usually want to come out.
Right.
They don't really like being held. That's the difference. Because, like, they live mostly in water on the ground. They're not really climbers at all, or retics like to climb. So when they are being held, they feel like they're falling. So they just kind of hold on. And they will hold on to anything. So once like half their body's out, their tail will grab the cage and they won't want to come out. So you have to like keep pulling and like lift them up out of it so they don't catch that lip.
I'm sure on the taller enclosures, you've got to pull them out, and I'm sure they've slid out like the enclosures, and you have to hold on to the enclosure. I had to do that with one of my retics once. I can imagine.
The best part when I do that is when they grab a water bowl and decide to dump it on me. That's there's a video of that. That's happened a few times, actually.
I can imagine. That's hilarious.
I just French because I have those like big, huge bowls in there from like Tractor Supply that hold like close to 100 gallons.
Geez, okay.
Bowl. You can't fill it all the way when they're in it because then they overflow it. But it's like
exactly.
So it's like 50 gallons that you get dumped on you. And it's not always pretty.
I gotta go on your social media, try to find one of those videos. But I hope that well, let me ask you this: do they shit in their water often?
Oh yeah, that's like the main place. Like cage cleaning is easy because it's 90% just the water bowl.
Yeah.
Like they hardly ever like get the cage dirty.
That's got to be a great smelling snake room when you wake up to that. That's the worst, though. That's the worst part about it.
I miss those days when my retics used to do that, but I'm not seeing it as much anymore.
Yeah.
Dude, I'm telling you right now, you know, and they're not a sponsor, but I'm going to throw them out there. I don't know if you have an air purifier in your room, but I use the molecule system. It's expensive as hell, but let me tell you, since I've had that in my garage, even when I still had retics on paper, no pee, no poop smell. It was insane. I mean, I would go, and when you're feeding hatchlings and sometimes they'll bite, they wrap, but then they don't eat it. Most of the time within 24 hours, you'll go in the room and you'll be like, someone didn't eat, right? No, with this stupid air purifier, I now have to go back and check because it won't smell for 3 to 5 days. That's how good that thing is.
So I never had an air purifier, but like back in LA, I converted like half of my garage into like a snake room. So I had airflow coming in and airflow coming out. So it was just like a constant like cycle. Here we currently have them in the garage, but we are adding on to the house. Like we have permits and stuff. We're about to like start construction on it. That's going to have like continuous airflow. So it's kind of going to be the same thing. So right now, no, I don't. So it does kind of smell once in a while. Just when someone decides to poop, which it happens
in their water.
Ugh.
It's the worst.
That and the lizards like to do that too in the water, so that's fun. I got 2 water
it's fine with the 3-gallon little dishes you get from Tractor Supply. Those aren't too heavy pulling out, but I can only imagine pulling one of those. Are you doing shop vacs on that? Like how are you emptying that?
So what I have is just like a sump pump. I just drop in there and then I hook a hose up to it that runs it straight into like the grass in the backyard and it just dumps it straight out.
Oh, that's great.
Oh, nice. Okay, perfect.
Yeah. And then I just take the empty bowl out and go and clean it. So it's light.
Okay.
You know, can't bust your ass all the time. I have
right.
snakes to do that.
No, I tell my employees here all the time, work smarter, not harder.
Exactly.
They'll they're cleaning a cage and I find them walking back and forth sometimes to like go dump the scooper into the trash that's on the other side. I'm like, let's bring the trash over to where you are and let's make our lives easier.
Yeah.
Right.
Put wheels on. I used to have because back in LA when I used to have just like a RV dump outside of like outside. So, but the hose wasn't long enough to go all the way out. So I would have this like bucket on wheels. I just dump everything into and then go and dump it. So it was just like an easy system to kind of do. Now I can just run a hose straight out. But like, yeah, think smarter, not harder.
Exactly. Or keep it simple, stupid, right? Kiss.
Yeah.
One thing that I kind of got the impression of when it came to behavior right? And things that stood out that were different than retics. Like you said, you can't really read their behaviors as well as retics, right? But one thing that I've heard people talk about, or one thing that I've at least observed is, especially when they're smaller, when they're in that striking stage, it's just, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you could be handling them and everything looks hunky-dory and they'll just go at the craziest angles and just rock you real quick and then just be like, okay, we're friends again.
That was my experience with my first bite. I was just hanging out with this like 6-7 foot green, and there were a bunch of people around, so it got spooked by something and was looking this way, whipped around, hit my wrist, and was back looking the other direction before I even knew it happened.
Yeah, so especially with babies, they're a little bit easier to read. So you can always kind of tell because they'll kind of like backtrack sometimes up their own body if you're holding like a baby, and then they'll go for anything that moves. It's like if your finger moves, anything, or they'll go and you can feel their nose kind of nudge you. They're kind of getting a sense of like, I'm gonna probably bite you. Like they don't know what to do, so they're like thinking about it. And adults will do that too. Sometimes they'll do the nose nudging thing where they'll just kind of like poke you and then just bite.
That's fun. So, it's good times.
Yeah. But the good thing is they have such smaller teeth than retics. It's not that bad.
Really?
Yeah.
Damn. Okay. But
yeah,
but
my
the thing
anaconda
is, their
bite
heads
was maybe
are
my
so
easiest
big.
bite I've ever taken. And I took a bite from pretty much the same size boa constrictor, and that one sucked.
Yeah.
Boas got big teeth.
They broke
well,
off.
At least common boas. But no, you look at a like, and maybe this is just my like you'll find them all the time, right? Like there's a lot of or Blake. Blake is always going out to South America now, and he's getting anacondas out of the water. Their heads are massive, so I can agree. Like sure, teeth aren't as long, but their heads are huge.
Yeah, they have more teeth, but they're small.
Fair.
So, yeah,
that's fair. If it's okay with you, and for people that are listening that are interested in this, they're probably already very much aware of where these animals are from. But if you don't mind kind of going into and sharing a little bit about their natural history, where they're from. Do you know anything about their subspecies as well? Right? Like there was a third one that came up, and we can go into that in a bit because I have some.
I don't know much about like the subspecies, but I do know that like new species they found is like there's not a lot of research behind it. That article that came out like wasn't really proven right. They look exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's no real difference in like locality there. It's like I don't know how true that actually is. They said like blood testing or something was different, but at the same time like the same percentage or something as like humans are from some other species.
Yeah, like 5. So the difference was 5%, right? And I forgot the method that they used to do the genetic testing, but there was someone who released an article who's a biologist, a scientist, who stated that the type of testing they did was insufficient, and that it basically was like a super rush thing to come up with this third species. And I don't know. I've said this before. I feel like a lot of people in the research world in herpetology and in science are just out to make that name, and they get funding, right? So they get some of their utilities paid for, and they can stay in the lab longer because they're getting the funding to do the research. And when you have people funding you, you're kind of pressured to create results, right? And I love chondros now, but do I think that a Biak is a different species than an Aru? No, it's a green tree python. They're different colors, sure, but come on. So, I mean, that's my opinion. A lot of people don't like that. And I mean, you could almost argue the same thing with carpets too, but I don't want to lose our carpet fan base here. So sorry, NPR. But yeah, so generally speaking, they're found where? South America?
South America, basically all over the Amazon.
Okay.
I mean, anywhere there's water, you're probably going to find one, to be honest.
So they are mostly, I mean, I would imagine mostly aquatic snakes are in the water a lot.
Yes and no. So whenever I tell people to like set up a new cage, I always say give them 2/3 water. No, sorry, 2/3 land, 1/3 water. But make the bowl big enough, or whatever you are giving them water for, is like big enough they can fit themselves in submerge, whatever they want to do. So the land part is so they can stretch out and move all the time and still have like they like getting out of the water. Like I have some that spend 90% in the water, and I have some that spend nothing in the water. They'll just go and drink. Like it all depends on the snake. So they don't always need like fully aquatic setups.
I've heard there can be some problems associated with too much soaking with green anacondas. I don't know how much validity there is. Yeah, okay.
Dude, I just got import Papuan carpets. My garage is already like Indonesia. It's already 70% humidity in there. And I had a male Papuan import that came in and clean of mites, no external parasites, have done all that stuff. There's no internal parasites. He decided he wanted to soak for 3 straight days. And I looked at him and I opened up the tub and I was like, oh shit. And I saw water blisters on him. And it's the first time I've had to deal with it. And just shitty that it's with an import who doesn't want to be handled. So yeah, I mean, let me ask you this. How do you deal with water blisters? Have you had that happen?
So I have seen it one time, and it's always with like a baby that has like too much humidity. And I see a lot with people making the mistake of giving babies way too much humidity from the start.
Makes sense.
So water blisters are easy if you want to take care. If it's like right at the very start, give them very dry setups, and then it'll go away within like a shed. Like make sure they're eating, but give them very dry setups because it dries it out. They'll shed it out, and then you won't even tell they had it. That's why I always say, like, give them that much, like, land portion compared to water. But when you're dealing with it, give them a very small bowl they can't really submerge in because they're going to want to continue to submerge themselves, and it's going to create more and more blisters.
That's exactly what I did. It's got a tiny water bowl in there, and then the moment that I got it out and got it dry, I literally fed it a small rat, which for that carpet is a really big meal to hopefully induce a shed, and I was hoping after the shed it'd be good.
Yeah, it always happens a lot. Like I've seen when like people let their snakes dump the bowls, and they say, oh, like if they have it on like some kind of bedding that soaks it up, I was like, oh, that'll just create humidity. It can create too much humidity too.
Right.
Even if they're not in the water, it can still be too wet for them.
Right.
So it's always like if they dump it, clean it, new water, fresh bedding, you won't really have that issue then.
Okay. Yeah, and it makes sense. And I'm imagining as long as you, and I could imagine if it has blisters on bedding, you'd probably want to put it to paper because you don't want mold and bacteria to grow with blisters on its body because that's how it turns into an antibiotic issue and when you need to start treating it more invasively.
Yeah.
Well, since we're already kind of on the topic of care and husbandry, what kind of setups, like setup size, are you recommending using that kind of thing for your adults?
So my adults are in 8 by like 3.5 foot cages.
Okay.
So decent. Half of them I built. Other half are AP cages, ones I just got. So yeah, so they're pretty big. I mean, my biggest females.
Dude, 3.5 feet deep. That's a pain. That's reaching, man.
I mean, I'm pretty tall. I mean, I'm almost 6 foot, so I can reach the back of them no problem. But yeah, it's mostly because like I can fit like the bigger bowls and stuff in there, and it gives them more room to like move around. Even though everyone thinks they need like massive, they don't need zoo-like enclosures because like if they're not in their water, which they can float in their water tubs, like that's how big of bowls I put in there. They're floating. They're curled up usually behind the bowl or like on the heat. Like they're not constantly moving. These snakes don't like to move that much. Like retics move 10 times more than anacondas do.
That's a fair statement.
Yeah.
Yeah. Retics are super active. And then the only python I can think of that's more active than a retic is probably a scrub.
Probably.
So if you don't mind, can you, I want to stay on the topic of husbandry, but can you walk us through, I guess like I'm a customer and I'm buying a neonate or I'm buying a juvenile young animal from you. Can you walk me through, husbandry setup parameter, what you're setting it up with at first, and then just kind of through those stages of life. And if there's any temperature changes and whatnot, like let's go into like a basic care guide throughout a lifespan of an anaconda.
Okay. So
no breeding talk here.
Okay. So when someone buys a baby, I always tell them like, give them a cage big enough Or it's always small to start out because I keep them in like V18s when I get them eating and stuff, and then I'll move them up to like a CB70 tub. If you don't have the rack system, I always say like get something on the smaller side, put a lot of hides in it, and then always give it a bigger bowl because they'll be in that bowl most of the time if they're not like hiding. They love to hide in bedding as babies and stuff. So either some type of stuff that helps with humidity, like Reptichip and like that kind of cocoa bedding stuff, always great. And then give them hides, one on the cold, one on the hot. Always, And then as they grow, which by the way, they grow extremely slow.
That's what I've heard.
They are not like retics in the slightest. So a 1-year-old anaconda is like just barely double the size as like a baby. So
wow.
You can keep them in like a smaller setup for a good amount of time, but like obviously like you kind of take a guess at like when you need to like move them up. So like for the first 6 months, they're fine in like a V18 until you get them established. And then I always put them in a CB70 and they'll probably be in that for the next 2 to 3 years.
Wow.
So really, really slow growth.
Yeah.
I've always heard that, which is why I often heard, and man, I'm the one who set the rule, no breeding, but I heard that females typically are breeding mature by like 7 or 6.
So 6 is pretty young, but it's possible. I always say 8 years old because that's when most of them start going, and they don't really, anything under that tend to slug out their first time. And it stresses out the animal. So females, I always say like 8 years. And males can breed at 4. I always kind of say 5 to 6 years because they kind of need the size. Males, like they're small, right? So they're smaller, a lot smaller. So like a female will crush them pretty quickly.
I was going to say, with that squeeze strength, I'd imagine that the males have to have, a little bit of hardiness to them.
Yeah, exactly.
Also, if you're going to try and breed, downsize their water bowl to something very small because that female sits on him in the water bowl, she's drowning him.
Oh, wow. For sure. Okay. Yeah, no, I could imagine.
So what I always do is I get like the smaller bowls and I put one at each end.
Okay.
So there's always 2. So they have water. They're just small.
So when it comes to husbandry setup with them, we've talked about cage sizing and requirements as they're growing up. And I'm assuming that once they're established and they grow out of that CB70, I mean, you can put them into a larger enclosure and at that point, once they're 3-4 years old, they're pretty much good to go. And whatever you put them in, they're going to be okay. Now let's talk about like, obviously we know they need high levels of humidity. They're from the Amazon and they stay in the water a bunch. That's what a big water bowl is for. And they typically, I'm imagining, regulate their humidity that way if they need to soak more. But what temperatures are you keeping them? I'm assuming you're keeping in a gradient aspect and giving them a hot spot, or are you doing ambient with them?
So I do kind of both. So they always have a hot spot of like 88, 89. So it's not too much different than like what you give a retic a hot spot, right? Cold side, I'd always say about around 80. And then I do ambient because during breeding season, I have to drop the room temperature really, really low. And the stuff that's not breeding still needs heat. So I kind of have to do both.
Yeah.
So
88, 89 hot spot, 80. Does your ambient in the room ever get to like 82 at times?
It does.
Damn, see, this is bad. This is telling me that my current setup is good and I just need to provide them a hot spot. This is bad.
I mean, here's the thing. So when you drop the temperature during breeding season, I go down to sometimes 70 degrees sometimes.
Yeah.
That's how low they kind of need to go.
Okay.
But I always keep the water on the cooler side, which they tend to like more. If you keep it in the middle, they'll still sit it in the hot side. They'll tend to kind of go to the cool side unless they really need the heat.
Okay.
So they are actually very hardy animals. Like I said, keeping it on the cold side is not going to hurt them because everyone thinks they're going to get like respiratories and stuff. Like they're not. Like anacondas take really cold temperatures, especially during breeding season. Like I've never had one with respiratory. So.
Completely different than berms and cooler temperatures.
Oh, yeah.
But when you let's say like when you do have it cooler, you still at night are giving them that hot spot?
No. So here's the thing. You have to like throw females into a cycle. So like the males will all drop their temperatures right before introducing them to like 82 and leave them at that as like an ambient. Right. And then the females have to go in like a 2 to 3 week cycle of hot, cold, hot, cold. So at night you drop it to like 74, 72, sometimes lower if it depends on like the snake, because sometimes they'll want to go lower to get them to cycle. And then you bring it back up during the day. So it's like a night drop.
So night drop, heat is cut.
Yeah, from those cages. That's why I kind of do ambient and like everything else, because like when they're not breeding, the ambient's always around 80, 78,
Okay.
80. Inside the cage on the cold side, it's usually around 80 if you put a heat gun to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. It's good to know that they can take cooler temperatures.
We also want to thank VivTech Products for being an affiliate sponsor of the Retic Lounge. Stop by VivTech Products for the best UV spectrum lighting on the market that will enhance and improve your snake's overall well-being and health. Visit vivtechproducts.com and use the code ReticLounge23 today for 15% off. Again, visit vivtechproducts.com and use our affiliate code ReticLounge23 today for 15% off. Looking for the perfect accessories for your hatchlings or juvenile retics? Look no further than Kelley Guy Serpents. Our sponsor, Chris Sexton, is coming in hot with an amazing 3D printer, creating top-notch perches and other caging accessories for your beloved pets. Enrich your retics environment with their high-quality products. Use our promo code TRL10 for a 10% discount on your purchase. Visit them today at HelleyGuySerpents.com and start giving your pets the best. Kelley Guy Serpents, the premier source for 3D printed caging accessories. Again, that's www.HelleyGuySerpents.com and use our promo code TRL10 for 10% off all of your 3D printed accessories today.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering if most boa species are like that. Which, by the way, I didn't even ask you. Do you keep other boa species?
I don't.
Interesting. That's weird.
I keep all the big
just
stuff.
anacondas. That's it.
Just the king of the boas.
Just the king.
All
Yeah.
you need.
I mean, king of snakes, ideally. Man. Okay. Where are we at, Nathan?
Can you explain just a little bit about their diet from neonate to adult?
Thank you. Good point.
What kind of your feeding regimen looks like over there?
So as babies, I always try to start them on live pups, which isn't always the best because they tend to like birds more as their first meals.
Mm-hmm.
But I can usually get most of them to take a frozen thawed chick as their first meal. If that doesn't work, you go to quail, and if that doesn't work, you want to start scenting with tilapia. But I always try to like get them on either chicks or rats from the start. And then as they grow, you just kind of like up their size. And then if you need them to switch, you have to do like the scenting of stuff. So they're
a little bit picky.
Babies are pretty picky. And it can take them a long time to get eating too. I think the longest I've had one go without eating from like being born is like 6 months.
Yeah.
And I was like trying to like force feed it and stuff, and it was just like no. And then finally it just ate, and then it was thriving and fine.
Gotta love those animals.
They're so stressful sometimes.
Oh yeah, they'll test your patience for sure.
Oh yeah.
I've had people that I've kind of just groped and complain about the price of anacondas and how they haven't gone down. And I just want to summarize what I've heard you say so far. You can't breed them until they're 6 to 8 years old, and 6 is wishful thinking. So you're talking about housing, feeding, caging a large species for 8 years before they can produce their first litter. And then on top of that, they're not the easiest to establish. And oftentimes, I'm assuming you're probably letting them go at the earliest for the most part around that 6 month mark. Or I'm assuming some can get established before then, but
yeah, I mean, I've had some eat the second day they're out. Like, there's just some that just want to, eat. But usually it's around like 4 months is when I'll start. Like, I usually bring them to shows first, or like advertise them for sale or whatever I have to do. But it's usually around like 3.5, 4 months. It's kind of like, because then they've had a couple of meals, they've at least shed once or twice after those meals. Because like when they come out, they're live birth, by the way, if you didn't know that. when they come out, they'll shed immediately. Like some within the first week. It's crazy.
Damn.
So like their second shed is usually after they've eaten like 2 meals. So yeah. So
that's pretty mark. But I mean 8 years, and then the fact that some of them are a pain in the ass to establish. I sometimes try to.
Well, then you run into the retic problem too, Lucas. Is no importation on green anacondas.
Well, right, exactly, and I don't know. I do my best to emphasize to empathize with my, with customers and with the market and the people that with consumers, right? I do my best to try to empathize with them, but at the same time, until they're in it and they're actually doing the work to put in it, especially for an animal that's going to live 20, 30 years, I'm sorry, but I think the price point for, where they're at right now is good, which Megan, I don't know if you're comfortable sharing, but what's I guess the market value of a 6-8 month old anaconda?
So I sell females for 18 and males for 16, but there's also more factors into that. So they don't breed every year. They breed every 2 years.
There you go.
So, and there's only a handful of people breeding them. And I'm the only one who's really doing it consistently, like year after year, if you notice that. Mm-hmm. So I have so many females, I just rotate certain ones out. So I always at least have one litter per year.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's it. Again, just goes to show that I think that I like this conversation part of the podcast because there's something to appreciate about spending that kind of money on an animal and knowing the inside and outs of what it takes to actually get to the point of where you can actually purchase one. Because they're not common. I've already convinced myself when I get one, I'm getting it from you, and I absolutely want to. I'm hoping that when that time comes, that Blue is still siring some clutches.
Okay, I mean he should be. I mean he's my best breeder. He'll breed a water bowl if you let him. I'm not even kidding. He does constantly. Like you throw him with the female, he always goes to the water bowl first and like wraps around it. You can see his little tail, which is cool about anacondas. Because they do that like arching thing that retics do too, but they're not aggressive with it. Oh yeah,
that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
I've never seen another species do that, so that's interesting.
Yeah, so they do that too, but they're not aggressive about it. So like you can, my dog's trying to get in the litter box. Hey, quit it!
I've heard cat shit tastes good.
Apparently, they
breath smell to high hell though.
For real.
So with anacondas, you can throw multiple males in with the female, and it's called a breeding ball, which is really cool to see and watch. And it's also a good way to throw a second male in with like the male you want to breed, because it kind of, they smell him and they kind of like, oh, I need to get this done first. Like if you have like a lazy breeder, it kind of gives them like competition.
Cool.
So
yeah. Don't, for anyone listening, don't try that with your retics, please.
No, don't.
Do not try that with your retics.
You will not be able to separate them. You will get hurt, and they will kill each other.
Yeah, you'll probably have a trip to the hospital, and your males, one of them is probably not going to make it.
Yeah.
No, that's the damn truth. But that's really cool. And as a matter of fact, I know there's other species. Like I know a lot of carpet python species will do that. I think diamond pythons have been observed in the wild, in the rocks. In breeding balls where there's just a massive group of them that do that. I think it's always been something cool and fascinating to mention or to be able to observe. But damn it, Nathan messaged me. I heard all your ice chewing. Whoops. We'll edit that out. Yeah, I think that have you how often have you done that? Have you stimulated any male breeding activity by doing that?
Oh yeah, almost every time. Well, with Blue, it's easy. If you want him to breed a certain female, you can just throw him in, and like he'll just get the job done, because that's the kind of male he is. With all the other ones, you kind of want to throw both in at the same time. And once the one you want kind of gets the hang of it, you can pull the other males. And he'll just kind of continue.
Do you ever have a planned pairing? Damn, we just like really curtailed into breeding. We're going to scale the breeding back in a second, because I do want to kind of go systematically through the breeding process, but this is a good conversation. I know it's a good conversation. I'm just curious if like you've had situations where the male that you didn't want to lock ended up, you come back, you look and the male's locked and you're like, well, shit.
Not really, because like I kind of.
What?
I mean, I pay attention to them. So like I'll throw them in the morning when I start cleaning and just kind of observe them as like I'm cleaning and doing stuff. And when I see the male, you can kind of tell when that male is gonna start before like there's even close to becoming a lock. And that's kind of when you want to pull the male you don't want.
Okay. Do they do the whole circling thing around the female, the courting, and then they finally find their way in?
Mm-hmm. And you'll see it.
Cool.
They'll like, you know how retics do. They go and their tails will be right there too before they even like get on top of the female or anything.
Right.
So like, you'll see them start to like spur and stuff, and it's really cool to watch. And like,
interesting. I didn't think that they were gonna.
It's my favorite to see.
Yeah, I didn't think that they would be that. Just for those that breed retics, it's a very obvious thing. Like there's like, especially when you have a male. Like I got a wild caught Kalatoa that will, literally, I'll put a garden hose in there and I guarantee you he'll lock up with it. But it's a very obvious thing. I didn't think that it would be like that with anacondas. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's fun to watch. Like I did that with the albinos, the two males. I just threw both males in and let them go. So.
I'm trying to think, Nathan, under husbandry aspects before we jump into
we've already talked about temperament. I mean, generally pretty docile if you work with them. But is there any like enrichment or extra stuff that you're doing with them?
I mean, I'm taking mine out all the time because I like to handle them and keep them, used to be handled. So like I'm doing that every day. Depends, whichever one it is or whoever is not sitting in their water currently, because I don't feel like getting soaked 24/7. But yeah, when I see them like out of their waters, I'll take them out, handle them for a pretty good amount of time, or like even when I'm cleaning, I'll let them like roam around on the floor just to like hang out.
Cool.
So yeah.
Oh, let me ask real quick, back on diet and feeding. With your adult anacondas, what size meals are they typically eating?
Mostly pigs, and I don't like doing massive meals because anacondas can put on. They don't have the metabolism of a retic, so like if you feed them too much, they just build up fat. Especially you can't really tell because they're a heavy-bodied snake to begin with. So even if you're giving them a lot of meals and it doesn't look like they're fat, inside they are. And I've seen that quite a few times with people like trying to like power feed and get a snake as big as possible or whatever. And it's just like with anacondas, it does not work. You will kill that animal.
I was going to say that's probably the most lethal thing for anacondas.
Oh, yeah.
Obesity, yeah.
Yeah, because they grow so slow. That just shows you how quick their metabolism is. You can feed them just as much as, like, from a baby. You can feed a retic the same amount as an anaconda, and that anaconda will only be double the size in a year, and that retic will be
7-9 feet. Yeah, exactly.
Depending on how much you're feeding, yeah.
Yeah. You know what's I mean, that's the best of both worlds. You have an animal that you don't need to feed a bunch, and it doesn't have that insane food response like a retic is. Like, good luck feeding a retic once a month.
Yeah. I mean, you can get some anacondas that have that food response, but it's so much easier to break than a retic. And I've never had an anaconda wrap a snake hook when a retic will wrap it almost every time you try.
Every time.
Every time.
Oh, interesting.
Right. Yeah. But like from babies up, I feed them rats for the most part for the first beginning of their life. And then once they're big enough to eat pigs or like rabbits, I'll switch them to that. So I get pigs a lot easier than I can get rabbits nowadays. So it's mostly pigs. I do have a friend that breeds chickens, and every time she gets a bunch of roosters she doesn't want, she'll give me those.
Awesome.
So
speaking of, I thought I would throw this out there. You talk about feeding pigs. Can I ask who you get your pigs from?
I get them from my brother.
Who is?
Jeff Kelley at El Segundo Pythons.
I just wanted to throw that. So stop messaging me, people, and asking if they're related. They are related.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I thought that was fascinating. I probably found that out maybe a few years ago. But for those of you that are looking into getting pigs for your reticulated pythons, I've always recommended. I haven't recommended anybody else, but Jeff Kelley with El Segundo, he's got his animals. I've never had a single issue with any of his shipments. Yeah, but I'm assuming that when you do get them from him, well, I mean, you've moved now, right?
Yeah.
So you probably have to get them in massive quantities now.
Now I do, yeah. So before it was kind of a nice deal. He did move like 3 hours north of where like I was living. But like once a month he'd come down and I would be at work or something and he would just drop them in my freezer. I wouldn't have to do anything. It was nice.
That's great.
Yeah. And then now I moved. I've only done this once, so I'll probably have to do it again in like 6 months. He just ships me now like a pallet of pigs. So you tell him, which you can also do like boxes, which honestly, if you have the room in the freezer space, I say buy a pallet because it's cheaper in shipping. Like in the long run. So you can just literally ask him whatever sizes you need. You tell him how many you want or how many pounds you want, what kind of sizes, all that. Because the pigs are labeled. They're in butcher paper wrapped. They have like what sizes they are on them. So yeah, you can get them shipped to you anywhere now in the country. So I get a pallet now. So I just fill the freezer.
What's about the largest size pig that you'll feed an anaconda?
I mean, they can take pretty big sizes, but I don't usually go bigger than 4.5 pounds.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and that's typically some of the larger sizes I get from him. Every once in a while, I'll be like, hey, throw a 6 or 7 pounder in there. And he'll be like, let me check if I do.
He gave me an 8-pound one that's been sitting in my freezer for a while. And I don't know what to do with it.
Send it to me. My Slayer will crush it.
I mean, I've got some big retics that can take it.
It's scary.
Yeah, I mean,
it's a big animal.
Yeah, I mean, well, my husband's got like a couple 17-foot retics. I just don't like feeding massive meals, so I just kind of have it. I feed like once a month to the adults though, because they have like small. Their metabolism's not as great, so it's like smaller meals is better for them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll feed them like the 4-pound pigs, and that's fine for them.
It's definitely cheaper to keep them than a retic if we're talking about expenses for food. That's for sure.
And I have those too, so it's like no difference.
I mean, but are you feeding them the same amount, or you feed them every
a little bit more?
Yeah.
Also, like anything that gets rejected wise, the retics get those meals too.
Right. Good garbage disposals.
Exactly. That or the monitors, depending on like what. If it's like too far gone, monitors will get it because they are even like the best garbage disposals there is. Yeah,
that's true. Real quick, and something that we didn't ask earlier when we were just talking about their requirements and things, but I think one thing that a lot of people in the retic world do, especially when you're not in the retic industry and you don't know too much and you're doing research, is you automatically think reticulated python and you think 20-foot snake. You think of an anaconda and it's no different, right? You think of a massive, giant, huge snake. And I'm curious from your perspective with your feeding and your animals, like what's your largest, what's the average size that you're getting for your, I don't know, your 10-year-olds, right? Like when I say adult, I don't like to just like, okay, if it's breeding, it's an adult, but 10 to 15-year animal, what's the size that you're looking at?
So my biggest one is just shy of like 15 feet. And she's anywhere from 16 to 18 years old, right? Around like 10 years old, they're going to be about 11 feet. Like they grow super slow. And once they hit like that adult mark, they do slow down quite a bit. So if you go back to my social media and look at like pictures from the last like 10 years, like Puppy went from like 12 feet to what she is now. So maybe 2.5 feet in the last like 6 years. So not much compared to like the time wise, right? You can definitely tell how big she's gotten because like I've been posting her forever. So you can kind of just see how she's grown through the years, and that kind of gives you a good definition if you want to go back that far. But the easiest way to say it is like when a female is ready to breed, she should be 7 to 8 years old. It's kind of like your sweet spot. Anything you can breed her at 6, but it's very difficult and they're usually too small still. Then you want to be about 9 feet at breeding age. That's like the smallest I'll breed a female. And then they kind of like if you don't breed, they will grow a little bit quicker because the breeding they usually don't eat for almost 8 months.
Okay.
So it slows them down in like growing size because they're breeding, right? So by like 10 years old, they're probably around, I want to say 10 to 11 and a half feet.
And
they
weight
should be at a healthy wise.
Weight wise, what do you think we're talking about? And so I say weight-wise, knowing that this is going to be a general ballpark, because I'm assuming you being a large constrictor keeper, you don't do what a lot of the ball python people do that get into retics and start to weigh their retics. So I'm sure you don't weigh your anacondas, but what would you estimate?
Don't, but I have weighed them a couple times just for like YouTube videos or something. So my biggest one is about 120, 125 pounds, and she's almost 15 feet. Right.
That's lighter than I thought.
Yeah. So like she looks huge. Like she's as thick as I am, pretty much. Like she's like my leg is smaller than her body. Okay. But that's just like an old snake. When you're like raising them slowly like they're supposed to be, like a 10-year-old female should be right around 60, 70 pounds.
Okay, that's not bad.
On the size, yeah.
Yeah, my Solayer, she's 80 pounds, and I only know that because I received her, and there was a weight on her without the box. She's about 14 feet and 80 pounds,
okay.
or 70 to 80 pounds. And so it gives me a reference just on weight, right? You're saying that at 10 feet, roughly around that size is, more manageable than I actually expected as far as weight goes, but I think it goes to their strength that I think is the different story here when you're holding them.
Yeah. And males aren't even going to be like half that, to be honest. Like my biggest male, and he's 12 feet, he weighs 60 pounds now. And he's probably not going to get much like heavier, but he'll get a little bit longer. And that's blue. If you want to talk about localities again, everyone says that like different. Like I said, I don't know much about like the localities of anacondas because like when they were imported, people just brought them in. Like no one.
Yeah, they were green anacondas.
Exactly. I feel like if you kind of caught them in the wild and tested them, you could kind of tell. Like there's some in different regions that have a lot more orange, and there's some that have like a bluish color to them, or like no orange, and that's just still what they are. And then I have kind of a variety of everything. At that point, I have some that are super orange. I have some that have like barely any orange.
Yeah. So. I think my favorite that I've seen, I don't know. I've always been drawn to blue, but I do like the contrast with the orange circular patterns but yeah, I mean, it seems like if someone doesn't want to breed anacondas, which is me, right? Like, I don't think I do want to, but like, seems like a male, like if I keep retics, right, I feel like a male is actually it's not a shot in the dark.
No. I always say if you're just going to have them as a pet, get a male because they'll still get big, but they are so much easier to manage because of the weight. It's still like a heavy-bodied snake. It's still like you're still going to feel like the power from it just because it is still an anaconda, but you're not going to get like this like huge, massive thing that's like gonna be hard to handle. Because like if you watch any of my videos, most of my females, the way I handle them is I get their head pointed in a direction and they just kind of go where I want them to, because it's when you're cleaning so many a day, you're gonna bust your back doing it.
Yeah.
So like I said, if you want just like a pet, stick with a male.
Yeah. Yeah, that totally makes sense. Also, who pissed your cat off? Does he need
That's
to
the one
eat?
that screams. I was telling you, want to go get him? That's the one that screams. I'll go get him.
That's
bloody murder. Just
that cat is happy. It's just wanting attention. That's what my cat does.
That's amazing. Yeah. Before, when we were in the back studio, everyone that's listening or watching right now, she goes and gets her cat. She had her cat that was up on her lap. Her dog was on her lap. I said that this is a very pet friendly podcast.
This is Leo.
What's up, Leo?
Oh God. The dog is jealous I'm holding him. Okay, he's gone.
This is great content. We need a clip out of this, Nate.
Did you just hear him hiss at the dog?
Yeah,
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, my cat and dogs have a hate relationship.
That cat likes to beat my dog. Like he'll swat at him and scream at him and whatever all the time.
Same with my male.
With the other two cats, my dog, like, they don't care. But my dog will bark at that cat.
Are all three males your cats?
Cat barks back.
I have 2 females and the male.
That's funny you say that, my male's the asshole to my dogs, and the female's the nice one.
Yeah. The male still has his balls, which I think is probably why.
Okay. Makes
Hold
sense. Oh, that's funny.
They're like chocolate dipped.
Chocolate dip nuts.
Stop it.
Could make a song about that.
South Park already did.
Why?
Probably.
The chocolate salty balls.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry. Gosh.
Oh, that's great.
Quite the scene over there. That's fun. I love the.
Yeah. I can get the dog too. He's still standing here. Barkley, you want to come up?
Megan, do you have any idea of what their conservation and protected species like what they are in the wild? Or Nathan, do you? That was just something that popped into my mind.
I don't, but I do know there's a couple like breeding facilities down there. Like whenever they catch like a weird looking one, they'll hold it there. Or not breeding or research, I don't know. Just because like I've had people who like work there who will send me like random pictures of like, these crazy looking ones they find.
Okay.
And other than that, I don't really know, because I do know they don't really want certain ones being shipped out. So when they find something crazy, they try and like keep it under wraps.
Okay.
From what I have kind of gathered. But other than that, I don't really know.
It looks like online, I'm doing a quick little search. It looks like they're on the least concerned as far as their conservation efforts go. I do know that the Amazon is being wiped away faster than any other rainforest in the world. But, I will say for all the people that I know and all the people I talk to that go down to South America, they tell me all the time, come with us. I mean, they find dozens and dozens. There's no shortage of finding anacondas, it seems like.
Thing is, it's like everyone I talk to always wants to find like the big one, but usually they find them like 10 feet or under is like the most common kind of anaconda to find when people go down there.
Right.
Like finding massive ones is like, I guess, really hard to do.
Yeah, and I'm almost wondering if that's just because it takes a very long time, and so with the longer you go, the more risks that you're exposed to and the harder it is to get there. Or I'm also wondering if by the time they get that size, they're just so good at staying out from danger that they know where to be. Probably.
Or like they're just so far deep in the like jungle or whatever, you just can't get to them pretty much. Like they figured out a way to like hide. You'd have to like go so far back in where like I know where like Blake and stuff go, it's like a quick little thing where they just go and find them and then they go back to where their campsite is. They're not going like days into like finding stuff like that deep in where you're camping on the ground or trees or whatever you're doing. I don't know. I've never been, but they've been trying to get me to go down there for the longest time and I just like haven't.
It's something I want to do, but every single time they come back and they have bugs ingrained in their skin and those.
And I'd rather not go with Blake. He's a little creepy. I love Blake. We have a great relationship, but I'm not going with Blake.
No, he's crazy as hell. That's so true.
Yeah.
Oh man. So let me ask you this, and this might be a part of the conversation that I feel like we bring this up with every guest when it comes to the species that they keep, but I'm sure you're very much aware. I mean, you definitely were made aware in that Retic video where you flicked off the Retic, right? But there's a lot of new wave people that are coming in. One of my really good friends, Riley, likes to just call them all Gen Zers, right? But there's a new wave of keepers that are coming in that really are about like these naturalistic large enclosures, keeping them as close to the wild as possible. And so there's now more than ever, there's been a conversation about the ethics of keeping snakes and reptiles in general and how we are keeping them. And I'm curious kind of like what your thoughts are with your experience that you have with being able to successfully reproduce them, and like what your thoughts are about this movement that is really starting to target people that are big suppliers of these animals that nonetheless are keeping their snakes healthy. But I want to know your thoughts. Like, should we be working to keep anacondas, a little bit better, or like, is there, I don't know. I guess I'll just kind of leave it open and have you just kind of answer the question.
I mean, there's always room for improvement with husbandry because, like, as time goes on, more stuff comes up where it's like, you get educated more over time. Like, there's more research, there's more this, there's more that. As keeping them naturalistic, it's harder to clean because you have all this stuff in there. You have to sanitize everything all the time. Every time they poop, it gets on everything, every little crack, every this. If you have like one or two, yeah, it looks cool, and whatever. But if you have a bunch, where if you're like a breeder, which people hate breeders now apparently,
right?
It just makes more sense, and it's more sanitary and easier to clean and more manageable to just kind of have like the simple little thing. But if you're still doing like the extra, like holding them, giving them some kind of enrichment, like that's still good. It's just like half the time people aren't showing that, so you get a lot of hate for it at the same time. So, I mean, yeah, keeping the naturalistic looking enclosures, it's cool. It looks great. But on a big scale, it's so much harder to deal with. And you kind of put yourself more at risk if you miss something, like bacteria builds up. Like if you have all these little things in there, it's just harder, and it takes so much more time.
Yeah, I guess I'll go on. Nathan, it's been a while since I've gone on one of Lucas's rants. But
I've also got a thing where it's like I lived in California. I went to the San Diego Zoo all the time, right? I have pictures of them having like the back door open, and all you see is the same kind of cages we keep behind their like display cages.
Right, absolutely.
No one wants to believe that.
No, they don't. But that's as a matter of fact, our sponsor, Heartland Reptiles, he has these amazing enclosures, and he's sending out some enclosures to a zoo, right? And a lot of people are like, why are you sending enclosures to a zoo? They have animals behind the doors, and they keep them the same way that we do.
They rotate everything out because those zoo-like enclosures you see at the zoos usually stress the animals out to where they're not eating because like there's people looking at them all the time, people tapping on glass, like everything. They usually aren't eating in those cages. So they rotate everything out. They'll feed them in the back and have a different snake or reptile out in the front that's not eating that week or whatever it is.
Right.
So it's like, no one understands that who like want to like hate on how we keep snakes.
Yeah, I think like just my rant is that there's a medium that can be met, right? And I think that a lot of people that are pushing for breeders to have these naturalistic and these big enclosures, and there's definitely going to be a niche for breeders that do that, right? But they're going to be keeping in smaller numbers. But when you talk about having to breed a species that breeds once every 2-3 years, and you need to have a decent number of these animals, it's really unfair to put people to put a gun to their head and say, basically, you have to keep ethically or naturalistically, or they need to be in a 10 by 10 by 10 type of setup. Because I've seen breeders places that they are doing it wrong, right? There are breeders out there that are just doing it wrong, and it's gross, it's nasty, clearly have too many animals, and they need to downsize and they need to reconsider what they're doing. But then there are breeders who aren't keeping them in these amazing naturalistic enclosures, but are still keeping them in adequate enclosures in order to run a breeding operation that I think is important. If you want a pet anaconda, and you want to give it a big, beautiful, natural setup, it's got to come from somewhere, right? And this person doesn't have just 1.1 typically. So I think that there needs to be I love the idea of people coming in and doing and going the extra mile for the animals, but I think that there also needs to be a realistic standpoint that people who are breeding are providing a service and they're providing a product, and they're going to have more animals that typically most would. And therefore we can't expect the same type of standard, in my opinion.
Yeah. What I always say is like, if the animal is in a clean enclosure and it's happy and it's thriving, like it's eating, it's doing whatever it should do, it's a good setup. Like I said, keeping it clean, it's eating. Because like I said, anacondas can be picky even as adults. If you don't have the right setup, it's not going to eat. And that goes for a lot of snakes. So if it's not set up right and it's not like well maintained, you can definitely tell when the animal is just not going to do okay. And that's when you need to change up what you're doing. But if they're thriving and breeding and doing whatever they, want to do or whatever, it's a good setup. That's basically how I tell people.
Yeah, it at least shows that the animal's stress-free, and it shows that Lucas is very muted.
All I said was right. Damn it. Yeah. I thought I did. I was like, okay, if we got away with another one. We have this running challenge. I don't know who's winning this year, but when we first started this podcast, Nathan was muted all the time. Then in year 2, I've been muted way more than he has. It's been a mess. We still don't know what we're doing.
In terms of selling the babies that you produce, what kind of considerations are you taking into like a new buyer, someone who's never kept green anacondas or maybe even large constrictors?
If I was 13-year-old Johnny, would you sell me an anaconda?
No. I wouldn't have sold myself one when I was 15, but I ended up getting one, okay?
Well, those Craigslist sellers are a little different.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I already had the big snakes too, so it was like I kind of knew what I was doing, but like jumping into an anaconda was like completely different.
Yo,
like,
kudos to your parents in the first place for just being like, sure, go for it. Like with all the other big big constrictors.
Story. They didn't know for like almost 8 months. They just walked in on me holding the thing. I had it for the longest time.
Classic.
And then they're like, "What is that?" And I was like, "It's an anaconda." And they're like, "Where'd you get it?" And I like told them, and then they're like, "How long have you had it?" And I was like, 8 months ish, something like that. And they're like, they were just mad. And then I eventually just got more, and they just kind of like let it happen.
That's my situation with my wife right now. That's how it goes with my marriage. It's like, what is that? That's a new species. That's not a retic. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. It's a new morph.
Yeah, it's a new morph. So, yeah, that's kind of how I went about that.
Right.
So,
but yeah, your ethics in selling and making sure that you're putting these very, 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 I feel like even more so than retics, you got to make sure that you're putting these animals into the right hands.
Yeah, because they already have that like stereotype, usually from like movies or whatever it is. I always ask like what they've had in the past, if they have any large snake experience, and I usually tell them it's like, hey, you should probably get some experience before you jump right into getting something if you haven't already had like bigger snakes. And that's usually just like find someone to like let you handle their snakes and to like teach you the ropes. It's like nearby, It's like usually a store will like let you volunteer or something like that, some kind of situation. But then I kind of like walk them through like the care. But I always tell people like don't jump in and just get an adult. Always start with a baby because you can always grow with the baby. So you learn as they grow. So I always try to make sure they have snake experience. And I also will tell them, it's like, if you have any issues, like you can always contact me no matter what. So it's like, for as long as you have that animal, like I will answer any questions, whatever, no matter what it is. So it's like, I've always stayed in contact with people who need help with babies and stuff.
And I appreciate that. I'm the believer. So I've said this many, many times publicly, but I'm not the person who's like, okay, if your dream snake is an anaconda, you need to start with a ball python, then go into a boa, and then get another large snake, and then get an anaconda. Like I'm very, very much against that aspect. I've always preached, try to get hands-on experience and go see them somewhere, make sure it's the right thing for you, but just research, and buy from someone that's going to do exactly what you said. And just know that what they're getting into, right? Like for me, if I was selling green anacondas, and I had someone ask me like a question, if they're like, hey, like I saw that you have babies available, how much are they? And then their next question was like, oh, how big do they get? I'd be like,
yeah, I wouldn't sell one at that point.
Yeah, hold up. Like, no, you should not be asking me the price of this animal before you don't know the basic like information. Like this is a big snake. Like it doesn't matter if it's 10 feet or 15 feet. Like it's a big snake.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I just figured. Now, one thing I want to do before we get into breeding, because I want you to break down breeding just like you did with husbandry, if you're willing to share some of the, tricks of the trade with breeding. But we were talking about health issues before, and you said that they're really hardy. But we mentioned blisters at times, but and you mentioned that they're not very susceptible to RIs. But I guess like, what are some of the like common health issues that you typically see happening in captivity, even if it's not from you, but you see happening in other people's collections or new keepers' collections? And then, do you take any specific measures to address health issues? Do you have a vet? What does all that look like?
Well, I don't have a vet locally now. I mean, I just moved.
Yeah,
so
you're 2 months relocated.
Yeah. There was a vet down by the San Diego Zoo I used to use before if I had any issues, which I never really did. I just kind of knew he was there in case I needed it. I haven't really had any health issues with any of mine. Like, nothing that I can, like you randomly have something just drop dead on you, and that's just kind of what happens sometimes. Things fail to thrive or whatever. Like, things happens in every species. I've only really had that happen like once, to be honest. But I haven't seen a lot of issues besides like the blisters. It's usually in like young ones too, or just like too much humidity. I see people like just throw them in like a tank with just water. It's like, oh, they don't need land. It's like they need land. So it's like that cat is screaming again. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. I appreciate it.
But yeah, and it's usually just in like small ones. And it's like if things aren't eating, you can usually change something and like get them eating and stuff. It's usually like people will have like a subadult that'll stop eating, and it's usually because they've moved them into a bit too big of a cage too quickly and it stressed them out. Like stress is a big factor in a lot of it, and like food can solve a lot of issues, and it's just usually like an environment issue of what is wrong with something. But like other than that, I haven't seen many other issues with them besides just like the blisters. And
Awesome.
And usually, like I said, it's in babies, and it's just like you got to keep them drier to keep that away.
Blisters, and then with other keepers who are overfeeding, just
obesity,
liver,
right? We talked about that.
Yeah.
Good to know. Always love hearing about a hardy species. Makes life a lot easier. But let's go into reproductive behavior. You talked about the males, they do the arching thing. You talked about breeding balls, but I guess if you can, like a breeding 101. So imagine someone is listening to this and they're like, damn, Meghan Kelley's on the Retic Lounge. I have a green anaconda that's ready to breed. I want to know how to cycle, lock, and what the process looks like, heat, temperature, all that good stuff. Generally speaking, what's the key to success with breeding these animals, and how do you go about doing it in where you are?
So the females you gotta throw into like a heat cycle. Basically, it's where you cool them down at night, usually into the low 70s, and then you bring them back up during the day. And you do that all through breeding. And once they ovulate is when I stop doing that.
How long of a period is that?
It all depends on the female, to be honest.
Okay.
So I'll start it prior to, so like, I know when certain females are going to kind of like go right around the time they start to cycle, because it's usually almost to the day every other year is what it is. So I've had one female like drop her babies on the exact same day for 3 different times now.
Oh, that's awesome.
So that's
nuts. But I think also that's kudos to you. I mean, that's you keeping shit really consistent for them.
Yeah. So you also want to keep track of dates and everything. So I always write down all the locks when I think they ovulated, because sometimes it's hard to tell in anacondas because they're so big bodied. It's hard to tell when they ovulate. But always write down their sheds after that. That's going to tell you almost exactly to when they're going to lay. It's like the post-ovulation shed. And they're not eating during this time too. Like you can try and feed them stuff during breeding. If a female's ready, sometimes they'll eat, sometimes they won't. But when they're actually gravid, they'll eat for like the first 6 months. And then sometimes some will eat. Like I fed one like the day before she dropped like a small little rat, and that kind of like threw her into like laying, which it was weird, but like someone said try to do that, so I did it one time and it actually worked. So
now, and it's not like retics in the sense that they're gonna go off food, and that's kind of your cue to start introducing.
Right. So they'll eat throughout almost everything. It's really weird, but like when they're gravid or breeding, don't give big meals. Give like tiny meals, just to kind of help them keep.
Are you talking about like a jumbo or colossal rat?
Yeah, pretty much, or like a 1 pound pig or something like that.
Okay.
Small meals, because if you give them too big, it like builds up too much poop, and then like it can hurt them when they try to lay. So it's
for
like
sure.
So
yeah. Let me ask you this: Are you doing introduction? Basically, there's a time of the year where you decide you're going to start temp cycling, and when you start that temp cycling is when you put males in.
No, so what I do is I'll start the cycle on the females like a week, 2 weeks before I even think about introducing the males, and I'll drop the males' temperature to like the low 80s, like their hot spot. So like they're at a constant temperature for like 2 weeks, and then I'll put the males in with the females.
Okay. And when are you making that decision? Based off of females' behavior, or just is it a time of the year thing?
It's usually a time of the year thing. Like I said, each female is different. I have some that go in the fall. I have some that go, first few months of the year. And then I have one that'll go in July. It's all depends on the female. It's just kind of like a learning curve. You got to kind of like figure it out.
Yeah.
But like your typical season is like March to June. It's like that's like their natural rainy season in the wild. So like that's when you kind of want to try introductions. But because where we live, you can females are kind of like weird. But it's always like whenever it's about to rain and you're kind of in that like cycle with them, the heat cycle, throw the male in, because that atmospheric pressure will throw them into like a cycle, help throw them into a cycle. So you can kind of introduce the male around that time, and they will usually start locking like 2 to 3 days before it starts raining.
Okay.
So always check your weather.
Yeah. Yeah. So is there anything you're looking specifically for the females to know that you need to start temp cycling, or you need to start doing, or do you increase feeding at one point, or
I'll increase feeding a little bit, but not really much. But it's usually kind of they're hanging out on one side of the cage more than the other, usually.
Okay, cooler side typically.
Yeah.
Okay, fair. So that's what you're looking for. Is you're looking for that behavior change when you start to see them hugging that cooler side?
Well, they'll be hugging it like constantly, because like most of them hang out in the water, which is on the cooler side, and they prefer that rather than hanging on the hot side. But when you see them outside the water consistently hanging on the cool side, like nonstop and never going to the heat, is kind
like
of
coils weird. On the wall.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah,
they're just like, because like where I have it, they'll like hide behind that water bowl.
Gotcha.
Kind of, but like normally you'll see them kind of on one side of the cage or the other, and like that's just their natural like resting wherever they're getting heat or cold. Well, and then you never see them on the heat. That's kind of like your tell. But I've also paid such close attention to mine. I kind of know what time of year each one goes. So when it's a female that's like new and never bred before, you have to like really pay attention to her behavior too.
Gotcha. Okay. So they're going through the locks, and then I'm assuming you start to see that ovulation swell.
Kind of.
If you're lucky.
If you're lucky.
It sounded like.
But I guess okay. So let's go by sheds then. I guess after they have that shed that they would typically ovulate, how many days until they give live birth?
So it's a huge range. Okay.
Huge, really. Okay.
Okay. They can go anywhere between like 160 to almost 200 days.
Wow. Dude, Nathan's face was what my heart just did.
Shit.
So
yeah, I was not expecting that number.
That's another reason why they need to be priced the way they are. Holy shit.
From shed. That's not from ovulation.
Yeah.
So
okay.
The longest I've had them go is 198 days.
Holy shit.
The earliest I've had is like in the 160 range.
That is still so much time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the gestation time.
That's it. They give live birth.
Okay. So okay, I see.
So hold on, we're talking about from their last shed?
Yeah, so their post-ovulation shed. They'll do a pre-lay shed usually a month before they lay. So that's another tell they're getting ready.
Okay.
So yeah, there's a huge range there. It's like 6 to 8 months that they're gravid.
This is like monitor breeding.
That's what I'm saying, dude.
But monitors lay eggs, so they can breed way more often.
Yeah.
Right, they just spit them out.
Can only breed every 2 years.
They're doing all the work.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally like, no wonder why you're not breeding them back-to-back years. It's because a year goes by.
You gotta build weight back on them, and it takes forever.
Dude, that's insane. Yeah, because they grow slow.
Mm-hmm.
They have slow metabolism. That is nuts. That's if there is anything that just out of this whole conversation that blew my mind is that, man, okay. That definitely, I think, reaffirmed that, like, I'll have a pet and that's about it. I'm not gonna lie, I'm a dopamine junkie. I like the instant gratification shit. That's why I have, 4 more species than I originally did within the last 8 months. Yeah. But yeah, that's a long time to wait. And a lot of worrying because she's holding them all.
Yeah, and like you don't know what you're gonna get. You don't know if you're gonna get 5. You don't know if you're gonna get 30, and you don't know if she's gonna slug.
You don't know if you're gonna get a bunch of yellow yolk sacs just freaking spit out.
They eat those. You can leave them in there; they'll eat them. I'm
sure they will. Yeah, they're hungry as shit.
I got one that if you're not on top of her breeding, she will eat her own babies. Yeah, that's the albino. She eats her babies.
Of course, it's the albino, the one producing the cheese, dude.
It's not fun. You know what's funny is when those were born, she was sitting kind of weird, but her days were like right around the time she laid, a little bit later than what I was like expecting. So like, I was on top of like watching her, right? I walked in at like 9 o'clock in the morning. There was nothing. She was sitting a little weird. I was like, whatever. I had a dentist appointment. So like 45 minutes later, I was like, I should go check her before I leave for this appointment, right? I go in there. She's currently laying and there's just babies. And I'm like, oh shit. And she's like, hasn't really noticed that she's like, she's still in that like trance or whatever. So right. I'm pulling whatever there is, which there was like 2 stillborns and it was like not fun. And there was like slugs. So I'm just pulling whatever I can as fast as possible before she turns around because she's known to eat them.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's it. Nature is crazy.
So that dentist appointment.
Honestly, you did better. I probably would have rescheduled, especially with the T positive albinos. That is nuts. Don't let me forget. I do want to talk about the T albino project and how you got those animals from Ben. We just did that episode with Ben. I'd like to talk about that, but before we do that, actually, you want to know what's funny, Nathan? As I was telling you earlier, I want to know incubation. I want to know substrate and medium, and I'm over here forgetting that these little shits have live birth. So that actually took away a large part of what I was gonna ask. Yep. I'm surprised you didn't freaking rag on me when I sent you that text. So you're incubating at the enclosure temperature, and which we've established at that point is a hot spot of 88, 89.
Yeah.
Okay.
And when they're gravid, they're on that hot spot like nonstop.
Oh, I can imagine. That is that meow, dude. It's just literally like
he won't
love
stop.
me.
He just wants food. He'll eat nonstop. That cat will not quit screaming.
Yeah, I have a cat that sits by the food bowl and does this all day.
I fed him right before I jumped on here with you guys, and an hour later he's screaming for more food.
Okay, so after we've saved the babies from being eaten by their mother, how are you clumping them all? Are you putting them all together? Are you putting them into individual V18s? And if so, what's the substrate bedding that you're using for the fresh babies that haven't shed?
So what I do is I rinse them off because they're full of goo, right?
Yeah.
Or with afterbirth.
Wait, weird question. How's it smell?
There's not really a smell. It's really gross to touch though.
So when they're giving birth and all that gunk that comes out, that doesn't have a smell?
Not that I've noticed, not where it's bad.
Okay,
It's
interesting.
just, I mean, it is what it is, right?
I haven't bred boas, so I don't know.
Their poops
Well,
are
and there's
1,000
totally a
times
smell
worse
when
than
you're
anything else.
hatching retics. You can almost like walk in the room and know that there's eggs pipping.
Yeah.
I can't.
I noticed it on my.
I mean, I can when I open the box.
Well, yeah, when you open the box, but that's also
you smell that goop, but no, because I'm the kid looking inside the microwave waiting for the pizza bagels to warm up. That's how I am with my eggs in the incubator.
Yeah.
I can imagine these little things with their heads pipped out, just looking at this monster through a window, just like. But anyways, so you rinse them off, and what are you doing after?
I just use Retic bedding, like the smallest little ones they have, and then I give them a water bowl and put them in the tub and leave them until they shed.
Okay, so separating them, putting them on their own, and about how long after that first shed are you offering a meal?
So after they shed, I'll offer a meal almost right away.
Oh, he's on a strike right now.
Dude, he's so mad. He'll just sit out here and scream for the longest time.
And what's best is he has no fur. That's what makes it hilarious.
Wait till he does that like deep howl. He'll do it in a minute. He's starting.
Okay.
Yeah, I can tell he's building up to something good.
There he goes.
He's taking over. I love it.
Oh man.
It's worse because there's one cat that's like super quiet. She does these little tiny like meep sounds, and then the other one will kind of match what he's doing. Like it'll be like a symphony. It's like when you're trying to sleep, it's the worst.
It's a retic striking at glass. They're telling you to feed them more.
Yeah. That cat will steal food as you're putting it in your mouth too. Like it's bad.
That makes me excited for NARBC Dallas. I stay with Phil Thompson, and he's got one of those cats, and they're awesome. I've tried convincing my wife to get one, but she's not about them.
Don't get a male. They're the worst. The girls are so much calmer.
Really?
Yeah. The boys do that. That's like mainly him. And they're kind of more on the asshole side.
You know, I feel like that's the opposite of like a typical cat.
Yeah.
Probably.
Males are typically, like at least normal cats that have fur, right? Males are typically the more chill ones. But back to anacondas. So you're offering them right away, and then feeding trials begin. And we've already talked about when you sell them off. So Nathan, you have any other breeding questions before we jump into, I guess, the next topic, what I just mentioned?
And what most people probably want to hear about. So I'm kind of sad that we saved it till the tail end of the episode, but we have to talk about the T positives.
Yeah. I absolutely love them, and it wasn't until it wasn't until you hatched them that I realized until they were born. I guess I could say till you saved them. That you got the project from Ben.
Yeah.
When did you acquire those animals? Or was it one?
No, I got all of his anacondas at one shot, which was how many after he died.
Okay, so how many anacondas did you get from him?
6. So there was the albino, 3 hets, and then 2 supposed aneries, which I bred them and they did not prove. So it's either I have 2 different strains or they just aren't anything. So I have to like figure that out still. Those babies won't be ready to breed because they take forever, so you can't like breed them back to anything yet.
Right. Yeah, that's another thing. It's like you want to work on a new project. Well, I'll see you in a decade.
Exactly. There you go.
Jeez. Well, yeah. I mean, prior to Ben's passing, how much interaction did you talk to him much?
Yeah, I talked to him quite a few times. So we would talk about like breeding and stuff, and I would talk to him a lot right before I started breeding. I got a lot of like info from him, which was good info, but a lot of it was like you needed to tweak it more. So like dropping temperature to a certain degree, he kind of like told me to do, but I realized you had better success if you dropped it even lower than that.
Okay.
What he was telling me. So yeah, it's also like he always said like the bigger the female, the harder it is to breed, which yes and no. You just need to have a stronger male in with him.
Got it.
Because he had one female he was never able to breed, which was the Anery. And then I got her to breed a year after I got her.
Okay.
So it all depends. And it's just like, yeah. He also tried to like rush. This is why so he had bred the albino the year he died. But he used a male that was 2 years old. Like he pushed those anacondas pretty hard to get to size to try and prove the project out and to prove it out. And she ended up slugging. So when I got her, she was like skin and bones because she had like just dropped. So
oh wow,
she had, like no weight on her at all.
Oh man, I can imagine. Just like he's going through the process of pairing and everything, and he died, and here she is just gestating, and she's just chilling with babies inside of her.
Yeah, which were just
Man.
slugs.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I mean, she's just going through that process, and then again, just the stressful situation of just like not knowing. You know, fortunately for Dave, he was over there caring for the animals, but yeah, I'm so you produced the first visuals when 2023?
No, 2021.
Okay.
But the problem is she dropped them like super early and they just didn't survive. So she basically yeah.
Did you drop that at all? Was that like public information when they came, or were they weak and you just didn't share? Because I don't remember seeing that.
I had posted a picture or two, like I think it was like 2 days after they were born because David told me to and super excited. And then like literally like the next day I noticed they looked healthy. They just seemed like the next day after I posted that picture, they seemed to just go downhill.
Man.
The entire litter, there was 12 babies in total. There was only 4 visuals there. The rest were hets. And then I took them to, like I said, I took them to that vet and I spent an absurd amount of money trying to save them, and literally all 12 babies died.
Shit.
So, yeah.
So then 2023 came around?
Yeah.
Or 24?
23.
Okay.
Yeah, so they were born in September of 23.
Have you kept them all?
And I only got 2 visuals out of it.
Yeah, I'm not selling it.
No, I'm not selling them.
No, it's not a price in the world.
No, turns out to be just a really bad breeder.
Which is how it typically goes with rare projects, right?
Yeah. So like when Ben made the hets, she only popped out like 5 babies.
Jeez.
The rest were slugs. And then that's where I learned she eats babies too, because he had told me that. He walked in on her eating them.
What the?
And then the first litter, same thing. I walked in on her eating them. I didn't even know she had dropped because she dropped them early. She was nowhere near. She was like 3 or 4 weeks early. So her timeline was like off. So I wasn't like paying super close attention, but I had like a camera in the cage. But when I walked into the room that day, she had an albino in her mouth.
Oh my gosh. My heart.
So that was, use pour a little vodka or something in their mouth. She drops it. So same thing with a bite. If you ever get bit and wrapped by something, a little bit of vodka will let them let go real quick.
I will say I've used Listerine, and Listerine has let me down once and has worked once. When Listerine let me down, I bit the tail.
So biting the tail has not always worked for me. I've had like smaller ones. So here's the funny story. My brother, like this was like 10 years ago, had a berm like bite him on his chest, like his nipple, and try to wrap, but it's wrapping itself, but like twisting at the same time. Biting the tail did not work for him.
No, it didn't?
No, it didn't.
Oh man. But did he bite it like corn on the cob? That's the important part.
I don't remember. This was so long ago. But that was a good one. I had a berm wrapped by hand one time, and I had to use vodka to get it out. And I've never failed with vodka. So
I can imagine.
Time to go grab a cheap bottle of Popov and throw it in the snake room.
Right. I'm sure the Russians would say vodka never failed them either, but
so
man. So I guess well shit, she's a bad breeder, so I guess you'll wait for 10 years until you have a good shot. But what was the sex ratio of the two?
I both males.
Okay, that's hopeful.
Yeah.
It
but the one
pushes it a
head I
little
got
quicker.
ended up being a female, so it worked out.
Okay.
So you got a pair to work with, and then you could take a visual to visual and see. I mean, at least you know if she produces, it's going to be visual. So even if it's 5, hopefully she doesn't eat 3 of them. But I'm still mind blown by that. I don't know if I'm gonna.
Video I have of her because I walked in with the camera like, oh shit, and then once I got like close to the cage, I realized there was a baby in her mouth, and I have that on like video. I'm just like, oh,
that's absolutely wild. So Nate, any other things that you want to jump into so that we can? I want to end with our Patreon questions.
Yeah, our future plans. I imagine that T positive project's pretty high on the list. Any other like cool projects that you're working on, whether it be anacondas or not?
I mean, yeah. So the T positive project will be a long time before I can get those babies to like breed, right?
Yeah.
Next thing is trying to prove out that anery. So I have what Ben thought was an anery female and an anery male, and the male is the one that sired the hets, right? So when I bred a het back to the female anery, it proved nothing. So that's why I think either she's nothing or he's nothing, or there's 2 different strains of anery or whatever, right? 2 different lines. So next thing is like taking those babies that are about 5 years old now and just kind of proving them out.
Okay.
All right.
So
I'll be paying attention in 3 years.
Yeah, hopefully. So.
Gosh, that's 2 things. Anacondas eat babies and they take 8 years to breed.
They'll also eat, if you put too small of a male in, they'll eat the male too, the female will. So you gotta be careful. They can be cannibals. So
okay.
So when you do introductions, pay very close attention and do not leave the room until you are 100% confident that she is not gonna eat that smaller male.
Sounded like popwin pythons right now. Epidoras.
Although they do it more commonly than anacondas do.
Yeah, but I've also heard a lot of stories about that species, and it's sometimes a missexing thing.
With what?
Like they're like missexed, and so they're no with the popwin, the Apidoras.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting as more research with them and more information comes out. But so working on that anery project, hopefully that proves out. And then obviously we know that you're going to continue to lead the way with the T positive stuff. Is there anyone else in the country that has even hets or anything, or is it just you?
Ben sold one of the hets. I keep hearing he may have missexed it because I think he sold it as a male. But you would have to breed it, which I don't think they've done yet. I think they've tried. I don't know. Like I don't know where exactly. I know who the name is, but I don't think he has anaconda experience besides that, from what I heard. So he doesn't really know how to get it to breed. And if he did, I don't know if he got hets or not. But those hets are going to take so long to grow up. Those pos
and then they're pos hets, right?
Yeah,
and then
you have to keep all of them because you don't know what's going to prove out or not.
Yeah, exactly. The last thing you want to do is sell a pair of hets
and not know, right?
Exactly. Oh no, that'd be a nightmare. Well, awesome.
It's constantly screaming. Okay.
I'm excited. I'm hopeful. I've seen the pictures of what the anery project that you're working. It looks like something is there. I'm hopeful that it proves out. But are you ready for a few Patreon questions?
Sure.
All right. Phil Thompson with Thompson Cold Blooded asked, will your anacondas eat if they don't have buns, hun? I had to.
I get that so often. At this point, it's just so annoying.
Yeah, I figured.
A lot of the questions on here that I'm looking at,
they've been answered.
There's 2 questions that I think I like. One of them is Russ wanted to know, and you alluded to this before, with keeping yellows in the past, but I guess the big difference is between the 2 that you've noticed, and I guess on that, why don't you keep yellows?
I just don't like yellows that much. I mean, I always said they have like small man syndrome because they're a lot angrier. And in my opinion, this is my opinion only, I just don't think they look as good. You know, they have that like weird mustard yellow, and it's like no other really contrast to them. Now, the morphs they have are really cool, like the patternless and like the granite, I think is what it is. And then there's an xanthic. Like all this stuff's been proven too. Where it's not like, you know, with my stuff, you know, you have to like trial and error and guess at it. I just don't like how they look, and they're just seemed so much angry. And you can get nice ones, but you have to put so much more work into them because they just are so mean, and they musk so much more. Like I've kept them. And by the way, anaconda musk is the worst thing I've ever smelled. If it gets on your clothes, burn your clothes.
So the greens must too.
They do, but they're not as bad. Well, they don't do it as often. So like I have had a few like adults do it. You just want to throw your shirt away at that point. Like it's so bad. Yeah. Babies do it way more often because it's like a defense mechanism. But a female anaconda will do it a lot during breeding season. So that room will not smell great during breeding season.
Right. Oof. And last question from Catherine. She's interested to hear how you would ideally like for your customers or people that are keeping your anacondas in captivity as pets. Like, how would you like to see them kept?
I mean, I always tell people how to keep them. So it's just like, follow what I do and you're going to thrive with keeping them. Always give them a bowl they can submerge themselves in. And like, I use a lot of the reptic chip bedding. I don't use it on my adults, but I use it on a lot of like the babies and stuff just because it's easier to like maintain and clean. But yeah, I mean, just kind of how I tell people to set things up is how I feel like you should continue to do it. Because like, I know they'll thrive in that. So it's just like, if you buy one from me and I'm telling you how to set it up because you asked me how to set it up, try to keep it that way because it's going to thrive doing that. Because that's just kind of, you know, the experience I have with it all.
Right.
I've been breeding for over 10 years now.
Yeah. Yeah. My favorite are the people who buy an animal from you and then ask you the question, you give them the answer, and then they go and do something that someone else told them to do. And
then, well, the worst part is when they just don't listen to you and they kind of like, they'll ask you, don't listen, and then ask why it's not behaving or eating how you told them it was going to. I was like, because you didn't listen to the setup.
Right. So, exactly.
Yeah.
All right, Megan. Before we wrap up and say our goodbyes, do you mind telling our audience and people that are listening where they can find you and all that good stuff? Drop your plugs.
So you can find me pretty much on any social media under Megaconda. And then I also have a website, which is megaconda.store. Because don't type in .com. Do not do it. It's not great. You can type in Megaconda anywhere and I'll pop up. YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook.
You know I have to now, right?
Probably not on the podcast.
Not on the podcast, but
don't do it on the podcast.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah, I have to tell people don't, because .com was taken when I started my website a few months ago. And so .store just sounded so much where you couldn't confuse the two.
No, I totally agree. I mean, mine was taken for mine that I'm building right now, and I went with .net, but .store is definitely safer.
Yeah, it's just such a big deal. Like .org, I think, was also taken and not great. So I just went with .store.
All right, fair enough. Yeah, for those of you that are tuning in and you know Megan, if you've been into large constrictors, you definitely know who Megan is now, but she's got a great website. I feel like websites are making a comeback, which I love. It's a personal touch, and to be honest, everybody's doing the social media thing that I think a good professional website is really important in today's day and age. Back then, just about everybody had one, and now almost no one has one. But follow her on Instagram as well. Megaconda, correct?
Yes.
Okay, no confusion there?
No.
Okay. And then I think you have a Facebook page as well, Megaconda.
Yeah.
All right. Do you have a YouTube channel?
I do. I don't post all that often on there, but I do post a lot of like shorts.
Okay.
Stuff.
Cool.
So
yeah,
it's
and
kind of the same as what I post on Instagram.
are you on the TikTok?
I am. That's actually where I have the most following currently.
It's popping. I tried.
It's because of that 1 or 2 videos of where I flip off the snake.
Right, exactly.
That's where
is that where your hate mail comes from too?
I mean, I get it everywhere. It is what it is. But that one on TikTok is where it kind of blew up, and then it just like followed everywhere else.
Yeah.
Which my Instagram, my old one, they deleted it for some random reason that just out of nowhere. Instagram just like, no, we're gonna delete your account. So like this one you currently are looking at is my new one I started like 6 months ago.
Yeah. That's not okay. I don't like that.
Yeah, no. They said I violated community guidelines. I was like, I never even had a violation. I don't understand.
Yeah, so, you give me a warning. Jeez.
I probably got like mass reported or something and it's just gone. So
or for inappropriate name.
It wasn't even that. It was just Meghan _ my last name because that account started as just like my personal one, and then as like I was getting older, I just turned it. It slowly became like my snake one, and I just left the username at that.
Oh man!
And then one day it was just gone. So yeah.
Yeah, I almost got my Facebook page taken down. I went to bat and fought with Facebook for 4 weeks, and they gave it to me back.
I fought with Instagram for months, and then finally, like I couldn't do any more appeals.
That's ridiculous. But Meghan, we appreciate you. Thank you so much for coming on. I know that you weren't feeling the greatest yesterday, so we really genuinely appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully I'll catch you at a show sometime soon, and I definitely need to get my hands on some of the snakes that you bring to some of the shows. I'm really looking forward to that experience because I shied away.
Lucas.
Huh?
Said bring your wife, Lucas.
Yeah, right.
Just tell her they grow very slow. It's a great selling point.
I mean, one thing I will say is she can identify. She does think a green anaconda is much cuter than a retic.
They are cute.
And they are.
Puppy eyes.
Yeah, they're adorable. But yeah, I remember the first time I saw you at a show. I didn't know you, and you had your snakes out, and I kind of shied away. Just because it was when I was newer getting into reptiles, and I was like, she's popular. I want to avoid her. But now I'll definitely be at your booth almost the whole time. But also thank your cat for coming on and being a part of the show.
Right here.
I could tell.
Right on you.
But all right, yeah, we'll let you go. Thanks again, and I'm sure at some point we'll have you back on in the future.
All right, sounds good.
Take it easy.
Bye.
All right, we got that one under wraps. I'm glad that we finally got the Green Anaconda species spotlight done. That was one that I really enjoyed, and again, my takeaways are they take 8 years to breed and they eat their babies.
Finally, a species Lucas may get into that he doesn't need to breed.
Exactly. No, this is one I've thought that from the get-go. I would just want one as a puppy dog pet just for the wow factor. They're probably, yeah, they're got to be number 1 or number 2 favorite constrictor out there. But yeah, for those of you that stayed tuned this long, thank you so much for watching. We'll be back next Friday with another episode. I wish we could tell you what it's going to be about, but we'll figure it out along the way. Shout out to our Patreon members, guys. We say this every episode, but we genuinely mean it. Our Patreon and our Discord channel is going off all the time. We have several new members that don't even have retics that are on there. So it's not just for retic people. That link is down below that you can see right there. Nathan, you got anything else before we wrap up?
That should do it. See you on 108.
See you, everyone.